But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs.
For centuries, the Olmec symbols carved into stone have whispered secrets no one could hear. Lost to time, their meaning has eluded scholars, dismissed as mere art or religious symbols. But now, thanks to quantum AI, those ancient glyphs are finally speaking, and what they're saying could change everything we know about human history. Celestial alignments, forgotten technologies, and knowledge so advanced it seems almost impossible. These are the revelations waiting to be uncovered. What if these symbols were never meant for us to decode? What if they were a message, waiting for the right time to be heard?
They worked in giant megalithic constructions. What they're most famous for is these huge carved human heads, which can be on a scale of up to 20 to 25 tons in weight.
For centuries, the Olmec civilization has intrigued historians, archaeologists, and linguists alike. Among the remnants of this ancient culture, perhaps the most enigmatic are the symbols etched into stone. These glyphs, carved with great precision, have long been the subject of debate. The symbols do not resemble any known writing system, and for many years scholars were unable to decipher their meaning. The Olmec, known for their colossal stone heads and detailed carvings, left behind more than just monumental statues. They left behind a mystery.
It's been known by archaeologists for quite a long time that there are anomalous skulls in parts of Brazil, which appear to show very strongly Polynesian or African features, very much like the features that we see on the Olmec heads. What the DNA is doing is it's telling us that there was something really weird happened with settlement. You see, what happened with those African or Polynesian-looking skulls was that they were tested for DNA when DNA technology was not as advanced as it is today.
These stone carvings, thought to be language, were often seen as either artistic motifs or religious symbols by early scholars. Yet, without a clear connection to any known writing system, no one could confirm their function or purpose. The symbols lacked the typical features of written languages. There were no clear phonetic elements or bilingual translations to help make sense of them. Archaeologists could only speculate, with some believing that these glyphs had a religious or ceremonial significance, while others argued they were purely decorative. But despite the lack of immediate answers, the Olmec glyphs continued to captivate the imagination of researchers. The symbols persisted as a silent record from the past, their meaning locked away for thousands of years. As technology advanced, so too did our ability to understand and interpret these ancient marks. This silent language, long believed to be indecipherable, was about to be unlocked in a way that no one could have predicted. In the early 21st century, a breakthrough was made that would forever change the way we look at these ancient symbols. The key to deciphering the Olmec script did not come from traditional archaeological methods or linguistic expertise, but from an unlikely source: quantum artificial intelligence, AI. This new technology was able to process data and detect patterns in ways that human researchers simply couldn't. It offered a new approach, one based not on linguistic analysis but on pattern recognition and mathematical inference. The turning point came in 2006, with the discovery of the colossal block, a serpentine stone slab found in Veracruz, Mexico. This slab featured 62 distinct glyphs arranged in what appeared to be rows, much like lines in a sentence. For years, researchers had pored over the symbols, but despite their best efforts, the colossal block remained silent. The glyphs seemed to offer no answers, and the silence surrounding the block persisted for nearly 2 decades. But in the age of machines, silence does not equate to defeat. As human researchers struggled, technology was advancing at a rapid pace. Deep within research labs in Veracruz, a team of scientists began to experiment with a new type of decoding method. Rather than trying to match the symbols with spoken words, they turned to quantum computing. The researchers fed thousands of archaeological motifs, iconographic patterns, and celestial alignments into an AI system, with the hope that it could detect hidden relationships within the symbols. The AI was not tasked with reading a story or translating words. Instead, it was asked to search for patterns, mathematical relationships that might exist between the glyphs and celestial events like solstices, agricultural cycles, or sacred geography. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. The AI began to reveal patterns that had previously gone unnoticed, providing insights into the Olmecs' deep understanding of the cosmos. One of the first discoveries was what the team came to call the sun serpent. This was a sequence of glyphs that appeared regularly, alongside depictions of astronomical symbols. However, these weren't just symbols for the sun or stars. They were specifically linked to the planet Venus. More precisely, the glyphs were associated with the precise appearance and disappearance of Venus in the sky, occurring over a cycle of 52 seasons. This discovery was significant for several reasons. In Mesoamerican cosmology, the number 52 was of enormous importance. It marked the end of eras and the beginning of new cycles. This number defined ritual calendars, and in many Mesoamerican cultures, including the Olmec, it was believed that the world could be reborn or destroyed with each 52-year cycle. To discover that the Olmec were tracking Venus's movements in this way, years before the Maya civilization even existed, suggested that their understanding of the heavens was far more advanced than previously thought. But this discovery was just the beginning. The AI went on to reveal even more astonishing insights. As it analyzed additional glyph clusters, it found that the Olmec symbols also appeared to correlate with the patterns of lunar eclipses. The symbols, it seemed, were not only tracking the sun and Venus, but the moon as well. The Olmec, who were once thought of as a primitive society, appeared to have had an intimate understanding of celestial mechanics, with an accuracy that rivaled, if not surpassed, the astronomers of early Europe. As these findings emerged, the implications were profound. If the Olmec could track the cycles of the sun, moon, and Venus with such precision, what else did they know? What other advanced knowledge was encoded in these symbols? Some researchers, however, remained cautious. They argued that correlation does not equal causation, and that the AI might be overfitting the data. They cautioned that just because patterns emerged, it didn't necessarily mean that the Olmec had deliberately encoded this knowledge into their script. Yet the more the AI analyzed the data, the more the connections became apparent. The glyphs weren't just connected to celestial events, they were linked to geography as well. The AI found recurring motifs near important natural features, such as mountains, rivers, and mineral deposits. It also detected patterns around natural hot springs, places where the Olmec had once quarried volcanic stone. It even uncovered motifs near aquifers and water sources. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery came when the AI found a spiral symbol that appeared consistently alongside these geographical features. The spiral glyph had been dismissed by previous researchers as merely an abstract symbol, but the AI's analysis suggested that it might represent something far more significant. It wasn't just an artistic flourish, it could be a map, a symbol used to encode information about the land itself. This spiral motif, the AI suggested, could represent energy, resource tracking, or even sacred geometry. The discovery became even more intriguing when it was revealed that similar spiral patterns appeared in other ancient cultures across the globe. Was it possible that these spirals weren't just decorative symbols but part of a larger, interconnected system of knowledge? And if that were true, what did it mean about the Olmec civilization's role in the broader history of human knowledge? The breakthrough provided by AI was nothing short of groundbreaking. The Olmec symbols, once dismissed as meaningless or decorative, were starting to reveal themselves as part of an elaborate system of knowledge, one that was far ahead of its time. From celestial alignments to geographic features, the symbols appeared to be a comprehensive record of the Olmec's understanding of the world around them. This was no longer a matter of merely deciphering an ancient script, It was about unlocking the knowledge of a civilization that had long been lost to time. As the AI continued to process the data, it became clear that the Olmec script wasn't just a language, it was a map, a blueprint for understanding the forces of nature, time, and space. The more the researchers uncovered, the more they realized that these symbols held knowledge that transcended the boundaries of their time. What was once a mystery was now beginning to take shape as a sophisticated system, one that could revolutionize our understanding of the ancient world. The discovery of the colossal block was a pivotal moment in the quest to understand the Olmec civilization. For nearly 2 decades, this serpentine slab, unearthed in the Mexican state of Veracruz in 2006, had baffled researchers. It bore 62 distinct glyphs arranged in rows, much like lines in a sentence. To the untrained eye, the block was just another piece of ancient stone with curious markings, but to archaeologists, linguists, and historians, it was a tantalizing piece of the puzzle. Despite the efforts of some of the world's most skilled epigraphers and linguists, the colossal block remained silent. The meaning of the symbols remained elusive. It was as if the Olmec had left behind a code, one that no one could crack. For many years, the silence surrounding the colossal block represented the frustration of the entire field. Archaeologists, like many of their colleagues in other disciplines, believed that some knowledge would remain forever beyond reach. The lack of phonetics, the absence of any bilingual translation, and the complete lack of cross-references to any known language made it seem as though the Olmec had written in an entirely unique script. While some researchers clung to the hope of a breakthrough, others began to consider the possibility that the symbols might never be understood. But the breakthrough came not from human intuition or traditional archaeological methods, but from the remarkable rise of artificial intelligence. As technological advancements accelerated, it became clear that the tools available to archaeologists were changing rapidly. This new kind of AI, specifically designed to recognize patterns in vast datasets, was becoming an essential tool for understanding ancient civilizations. It was in the research labs of Veracruz that the colossal block's secrets began to slowly unravel. The approach the researchers took was novel. Rather than attempting to match Olmec symbols with spoken words, which had proven to be a dead end, they turned to a different method entirely. They fed thousands of archaeological motifs, iconography patterns, and astronomical alignments into the AI. The goal was not to translate the symbols directly, but to look for patterns in their arrangement. The researchers wanted to know if the glyphs were connected to certain celestial events, like solstices or agricultural cycles. They aimed to determine if the symbols reflected a sophisticated understanding of time and the natural world. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. The AI did not simply find random patterns or coincidences. It began to identify clear and precise relationships between the symbols and astronomical phenomena. For example, one of the first patterns the AI uncovered was what the team came to call the sun serpent. This sequence of glyphs appeared consistently alongside depictions of celestial symbols. However, these weren't just symbols for the sun or stars, they were specifically associated with Venus. The glyphs, it seemed, tracked the rise and fall of Venus over a cycle of 52 seasons, a number of profound importance in Mesoamerican cosmology. The 52-year cycle, known as the century, was of immense significance to the Olmec and later Mesoamerican cultures. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, and it defined ritual calendars. The fact that the Olmec had identified Venus's movements in such precise cycles suggested that their astronomical knowledge was far more advanced than previously understood. This discovery alone marked a radical shift in how scholars viewed the Olmec. These were no longer just primitive stone carvers, they were sophisticated astronomers, tracking celestial bodies with a level of accuracy that rivaled ancient European astronomers. But the sun serpent was just the beginning of what the AI uncovered. As the machine analyzed the symbols in greater depth, it began to detect more complex relationships, not just with the sun and Venus, but with the moon as well. The AI identified clusters of glyphs that seemed to correspond with lunar eclipses. The Olmec, it appeared, were not simply observing the sky, they were mapping its rhythms, tracking the movements of the sun, moon and planets with an accuracy that was ahead of its time. This revelation was groundbreaking. The Olmec, a civilization once considered rudimentary in its scientific understanding, appeared to have developed an intricate system for predicting and recording celestial events. If this was true, it would challenge the entire narrative of scientific progress in the Americas. The traditional view was that ancient American civilizations had no advanced astronomical knowledge. But the AI's findings suggested that the Olmec, far from being primitive, may have had a far more nuanced understanding of the cosmos than previously thought. At this point, some researchers remained cautious. They argued that the patterns discovered by the AI might be coincidental. After all, correlation does not necessarily imply causation. They also raised the concern that the AI could be overfitting the data, finding connections where none actually existed. These skeptics pointed out that the Olmec were not the only ancient civilization to have left behind mysterious symbols. Many cultures across the world had developed their own systems of writing and symbolism, and not all of them had clear meanings. Perhaps the Olmec glyphs were no different. But as the AI continued to process more data, the connections became undeniable. The AI didn't just find patterns related to celestial events, it also identified geographic relationships. The symbols seemed to correspond to specific features of the land, including mountains, rivers, and even mineral deposits. In particular, the AI identified patterns of symbols near natural hot springs and aquifers, where the Olmec had once quarried volcanic stone. These findings were especially significant, as they suggested that the Olmec had mapped not only the stars but the Earth itself. One of the most intriguing discoveries came when the AI highlighted a particular spiral glyph that appeared repeatedly in the areas near these geographical features. This spiral, once thought to be an abstract or decorative symbol, now seemed to hold a deeper meaning. The AI's analysis suggested that the spiral might not just be a simple motif, but a form of mapping. Perhaps the spiral was a symbol used to encode information about the land, an early form of geographic notation, or even a method for tracking resources. This revelation had profound implications. If the spiral was indeed a form of mapping, it would suggest that the Olmec had a sophisticated system for organizing and recording the natural world. What's more, the spiral appeared not only at Olmec sites, but at other ancient sites around the world. This raised the possibility that the Olmec symbols were part of a larger interconnected system of knowledge, one that spanned cultures and continents. The AI's findings didn't just stop with geographic relationships. As the system continued to analyze the data, it began to uncover connections to other areas of knowledge. For instance, the AI found that the Olmec glyphs were linked to agricultural cycles. In particular, the spiral glyph appeared at sites associated with early crop cultivation, including maize. The idea that the Olmec were encoding knowledge about agriculture, perhaps even selective breeding and crop development, was a compelling one. It suggested that the Olmec were not simply recording celestial events and geographic features, but also practical, empirical knowledge about the natural world. This shift in perspective was monumental. The symbols were no longer seen as abstract or decorative. They were, in fact, a sophisticated system for encoding and preserving knowledge. The Olmec had developed a system of notation that bridged the gap between celestial events, geographical features, and the natural world. And they had done it in a way that was entirely unique, encoding knowledge not through written words, but through patterns and symbols that linked the physical world to the abstract. The AI had given these symbols new life, and in doing so had revealed the depth of Olmec understanding. As the research continued, the AI's discoveries only grew more profound. The deeper the machine delved into the Olmec symbols, the more it became clear that the glyphs were not just decorative marks or religious symbols. They were an intricate system for understanding the world, one that was far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. And as researchers began to realize the true significance of these symbols, they started to ask a more fundamental question: what did it mean that these symbols had been carved in stone and left for us to find? What did it mean that the Olmec had encoded their knowledge in this way, knowing that future generations would be able to decipher it? This was not just about understanding the past, it was about the future. The Olmec, it seemed, had left us a message, a record of their sophisticated understanding of the world. And thanks to quantum AI, that message was finally beginning to be understood. The discoveries made by the AI continued to evolve, revealing a sophisticated level of understanding embedded within the Olmec symbols. The breakthrough with Venus, solar cycles and lunar eclipses had already shaken traditional ideas about the Olmec's scientific and astronomical knowledge. But the deeper the AI dug into the data, the more startling revelations came to light. These were not just isolated events or symbols, they were part of a larger, interconnected system. As the AI began processing more glyphs and connecting them with astronomical patterns, geographical features, and agricultural knowledge, the full scope of the Olmec's intellectual accomplishments began to unfold. What was once thought to be a collection of primitive symbols now appeared to be a highly advanced system of mapping and knowledge preservation. One of the first discoveries that deepened the mystery was the sun serpent glyph. This particular sequence of symbols appeared frequently alongside depictions of astronomical events, especially those related to Venus. However, the pattern was far more complex than just representing Venus's movements across the sky. The AI revealed that the glyphs not only corresponded to the heliacal rising and setting of Venus, but also seemed to map its entire cycle across the heavens, tracking its rise and disappearance over a period of 52 seasons. This finding was groundbreaking for several reasons. First, the 52-year cycle, so important in Mesoamerican culture, is a time measurement that resonates throughout the civilizations that followed the Olmec, such as the Maya and the Aztec. The fact that the Olmec were already tracking such a complex celestial cycle thousands of years before these later cultures reinforces the idea that they were far more advanced than previously believed. The AI's discovery made it clear that the Olmec were not simply observing Venus's movements, they were recording it with astonishing precision. This was more than just a religious or ceremonial act, it was a detailed scientific observation encoded into their symbols. But what was even more astounding was the AI's ability to link these celestial patterns to specific geographic locations. As the machine continued its analysis, it identified certain motifs that clustered around important natural features like rivers, mountains, and volcanic hotspots. The AI found that these glyphs, often associated with celestial events, also had geographic markers that aligned with the landforms around them. The implications of this were profound. The Olmec were not just using their symbols to track celestial cycles, they were also encoding this knowledge in relation to the physical geography around them. The AI suggested that the Olmec had a deep understanding of the way celestial events and geographic features were connected, mapping out both the stars and the Earth in one integrated system. One of the most striking findings came when the AI identified recurring motifs near certain geographic locations, especially areas rich in resources like volcanic stone quarries. These sites, where the Olmec extracted the massive basalt stones that were used to carve their famous colossal heads, were marked by specific symbols. The machine linked the symbols to the physical properties of the land itself. Some motifs appeared close to hot springs, others near aquifers, and still more near mountains known for their mineral wealth. It was as if the Olmec had encoded geographical knowledge into their symbols, using them as a form of empirical mapping. This wasn't just a system of art or decoration, it was a functional way of recording vital information about the environment. As the AI began processing more of the data, it uncovered a pattern that had never been considered before: the spiral glyph. Initially dismissed as an abstract or decorative motif, the spiral began to reveal itself as a far more complex symbol. The AI suggested that the spiral could be a form of mapping, a way of representing natural forces or cycles that the Olmec were closely observing. The spiral, it seemed, was associated with patterns of growth, specifically with plants and agriculture. This discovery tied the spiral to the concept of biological inheritance and the cycles of life. The AI proposed that the spiral could be symbolic of the continuity between generations, a visual representation of the passage of time and growth. It was an ambitious hypothesis, but as the AI analyzed more data, it began to show that the spiral appeared consistently in contexts related to agriculture, fertility, and even lineage. It seemed to appear most often in areas associated with early crop cultivation and selective breeding, particularly with maize, the staple crop of the Mesoamerican world. The correlation between the spiral and maize cultivation suggested that the Olmec may have been recording observations about selective breeding in agricultural practices. They may have understood the process of plant growth and the inheritance of traits long before the advent of modern genetics. This was an extraordinary realization. What had once been thought of as an artistic symbol now appeared to be a form of biological notation. The Olmec were not just tracking celestial events or mapping geography, they were observing and recording the natural world in ways that were far ahead of their time. But the AI didn't stop there. As it processed more data, it found that the Olmec symbols weren't just related to celestial events, geography, and agriculture. They were also tied to the rhythms of time itself. The machine detected patterns in the symbols that corresponded to seasonal changes, agricultural cycles, and even social. The connection between these patterns was complex but unmistakable. The symbols were not merely a collection of isolated observations, they were part of a broader system, one that integrated celestial, geographic, and biological knowledge. The Olmec had developed a kind of living calendar, one that connected the movement of the stars with the cycles of the earth and the rhythms of life. The deeper the AI delved into the data, the clearer it became that the Olmec symbols were more than just a written language. They were a system for preserving knowledge across generations. The symbols were not written in the traditional sense. They were designed to encode information in a way that could be understood across time by those who could decipher the patterns. This was not a simple system of communication. It was a sophisticated system of knowledge preservation, designed to ensure that vital information would survive long after the Olmec civilization had disappeared. As the AI continued to process the data, it began to reveal even more profound insights. The symbols were not just tracking time, they were tracking the forces that shaped the world. The AI found that certain symbols, like the spiral and the step triangle, were associated with geological phenomena, particularly volcanic activity. These symbols appeared in areas with significant geothermal activity, such as volcanic hot springs and active fault lines. The AI suggested that the Olmec may have been using their symbols to record knowledge about the Earth's forces, including the behavior of stone under thermal stress, the movement of tectonic plates, and the location of valuable minerals. This revelation was staggering. The Olmec, it seemed, had encoded not just astronomical and agricultural knowledge into their symbols, but also geological information. They had created a system that could be used to navigate the physical world, one that combined knowledge of the heavens, the earth, and the cycles of life. It was a complete system, far more advanced than anyone had previously imagined. The implications of these discoveries were profound. The AI had shown that the Olmec symbols were not just decorative or religious, they were a system of knowledge preservation, one that spanned the heavens, the earth, and the natural world. They were a form of communication, but not in the way we typically think of language. Instead of using words or phonetic symbols, the Olmec had encoded their knowledge into patterns, using geometry, celestial cycles, and geographical features to create a universal language of sorts, one that could be understood by anyone capable of recognizing the patterns. The question now was, what else was hidden in the data? The AI had only begun to scratch the surface of the Olmec's advanced knowledge. What other discoveries lay waiting, encoded in the symbols, patterns, and alignments that the Olmec left behind? As the machine continued to process more data, the answers were beginning to take shape. The Olmec symbols were not just a lost language, they were a treasure trove of ancient knowledge, preserved in stone for thousands of years. And with the help of AI, that knowledge was finally being revealed. As the AI continued to sift through the Olmec symbols, the discoveries grew even more astonishing. The machine's ability to detect patterns, correlations, and alignments had already revealed that the Olmec had encoded an incredible amount of knowledge into their glyphs. The celestial cycles, agricultural practices, and geographic features were only the beginning. As the AI deepened its analysis, it began to uncover something far more profound. A hidden system of design embedded not just in the symbols themselves, but in the very layout of the Olmec sites. It became clear that the Olmec were not just recording information, they were designing their world according to a set of principles that extended beyond simple observation. The AI detected patterns of orientation and alignment between the symbols and the physical landscape. Certain symbols appeared at specific distances from one another, mimicking the arrangement of constellations in the night sky. The placement of temples, causeways, and even monumental statues seemed to follow a hidden blueprint, a layout that mirrored the celestial bodies themselves. This discovery was a turning point. The Olmec had not only encoded knowledge into stone, but they had also used the landscape itself as a canvas for their knowledge. The AI showed that their settlements were not randomly arranged, but carefully planned to align with astronomical events, like solstices and equinoxes. The placement of important sites, such as ceremonial centers and altars, was not arbitrary. It was part of a larger system of design that integrated the earth and sky in ways that were previously unimaginable. One of the most striking discoveries was the identification of a particular sequence of symbols that appeared across multiple Olmec sites. These symbols were always arranged in the same order, with the same geometric orientation. The AI flagged this sequence as significant, and when it was analyzed further, the results were remarkable. The symbols formed a direct link to the celestial movements of the sun, the moon, and even distant stars like Sirius. But it wasn't just about tracking these bodies, it was about aligning them with the landscape itself. When the symbols were overlaid onto maps of Olmec sites, they revealed a consistent pattern that matched the positioning of celestial bodies during specific times of the year. The significance of this finding was profound. It suggested that the Olmec had built their world according to a set of cosmic principles that were encoded in their symbols and reflected in the layout of their settlements. The AI had not only revealed the Olmec's understanding of celestial cycles, it had shown that this understanding was woven into the very fabric of their culture. The symbols were not just markers of time and space, they were part of a living system that integrated the forces of the earth, the movements of the sky, and the rhythms of life. As the AI's analysis continued, it began to reveal even more intricate layers of meaning within the symbols. One of the most surprising findings was the identification of a particular symbol, a pair of arcs curving inward toward a vertical center line. Initially, this symbol had been dismissed as abstract, with no clear meaning. But when the AI analyzed the symbol's geometric properties, it became clear that it represented the pattern of solar arc progression, the way sunlight moves across the horizon during solstices and equinoxes. This was a significant discovery, as it suggested that the Olmec had encoded a deep understanding of solar movements into their symbols, with applications for both ritual and practical purposes. The AI's findings didn't stop there. When the symbol was entered into a 3D solar modeling system, it aligned perfectly with a shadow-casting platform found deep in the Tabasco rainforest. This platform, once thought to be a decorative feature, was revealed to be a functional soul, activated only on specific days of the year when light and architecture met in perfect harmony. The idea that the Olmec had embedded such precise astronomical knowledge into the design of their structures was staggering. This wasn't just a culture that observed the sky, they had constructed entire systems around it, using architecture as a tool for understanding and interacting with the cosmos.
Perhaps the most profound aspect of the AI's work was the revelation that these symbols, these alignments, and these designs were not just meant to be read or understood, they were meant to be experienced. The Olmec had created a language of experience, one that relied on alignment with the forces of nature, celestial events, and the physical world. The symbols were not static, they were dynamic, interacting with the environment in ways that we are only beginning to understand. This was a system of knowledge that went beyond the limits of written language. It was a way of being in the world, a way of interacting with the forces of the earth, the sky, and the cosmos. The AI's final revelation was both exhilarating and unsettling. It had not simply decoded the symbols, it had revealed a system of knowledge that transcended our understanding of language and culture. The Olmec, it seemed, had created a framework for interacting with the world that was entirely different from anything we have known. This was a civilization that understood the world not just in terms of words and concepts, but through experience, and the knowledge they encoded in their symbols was not meant to be read, it was meant to be lived. This discovery has left researchers with more questions than answers. What were the Olmec waiting for? What did they hope to communicate through these intricate patterns and designs? The symbols, once thought to be an obscure and meaningless form of art, now seem to carry a message that transcends time and space. It is a message encoded in stone, in geometry, and in the very fabric of the earth itself. And as we begin to decode it, we find ourselves standing on the edge of a new understanding of the ancient world, one that challenges our assumptions and expands our ideas of what is possible. The question now is not just what these symbols mean, but what they reveal about the Olmec worldview. What does it mean for us to uncover a language that was not meant for us to read, but for us to experience? What does it mean for our understanding of history, science, and consciousness itself? As we continue to explore the hidden knowledge encoded in the Olmec symbols, one thing is clear: we are only just beginning to understand the depth and complexity of their legacy.